The Supreme Court today talks of balance, but that really is the heart of the issue. Where is the balance you can find between devotion, faith, and what is an act of parliament? What is the law today in India? Is this whole mandir-masjid dispute, should we go digging up the past? Well, let me speak now to somebody, Amish Tripathi, a well-known author, also of course author of the Shiv trilogy, amongst many other popular series, where really he's brought Hindu culture, Hindu gods and faith very much to the mainstream in a sense, and also the director of the Nehru Centre in London currently. Amish Tripathi, thanks so much for joining me. Now, I know you yourself are a Shiv Bhakt, and for you this is a matter of faith. But should the faithful or devotees be people who are deciding or looking at issues like this in a multicultural, diverse country like India?
Sonia, I think more than faith, this is essentially about the truth. There are, you find similar issues in various other parts of the world. In Turkey, for example, the Hagia Sophia church was converted into a museum and then into a mosque. It was just done just by fiat, by majority or a state, which you can say is perhaps not liberal. Right? In Spain, when Reconquista happened, even there, similarly, mosques were converted into churches. The issue is essentially something that is a matter of emotions and truth. I'm living in the West right now. I'm living in London. The Black Lives Matter is a very, very important and big movement here. Large part of it is driven by emotions. Of course, the mind can say that we should look ahead. But the wisdom of the heart says we have to manage painful parts of the past as well. And we see this across the world. India is not really new in this. Having said that, where India is different, you will find, unlike Turkey or other countries that I mentioned, the majority out here is dharmic and liberal. They wait patiently, sometimes for centuries. They should. I certainly would not advocate any hatred or dissonance at this point of time. But quoting from another foreign example, South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, one of the wisest human beings of the 20th century, President Nelson Mandela, realized that truth can be the only disinfectant.
But I want to ask you on that, Amish, because who really decides the matter of truth? Because I think the point here is not about the fact that whether a mandir actually existed before the masjid, not just whether it's here, but whether it's in Mathura, whether it's in any other site in India. That's not really the truth that is being sought to be established. The point is, how far can we go today in correcting historical wrongs? And should in India of 2022, an India where young people are looking for jobs, where young people are looking for economic prosperity and growth, is this what the topics or the focus that we should have? You took the Turkey example. In fact, nobody, I'm sure even you won't advocate for India to be like Turkey. And the South Africa example is slightly different, as is Black Lives Matter, because there's not issues of religion. Those are issues or of faith. Those are issues of race and apartheid, where it's very much, it's more, for instance, you would say correcting partition wrongs would be perhaps be a better example.
No, because actually, essentially, they're about historical pain. Right, removing the statues of Cecil Rhodes, for example, has no real economic impact, to the lives of, say, BAME British here or African Americans in the US. But still, it's the way human beings are, because the heart has a search for calmness to wisdom. Let me give you another example, which happens in India too. Shia Muslims, pay homage or matam manate hain. They mourn the assassination of Hassan and Hussein every year, who they were brutally assassinated by Yazid. And this happens every year across the world. In some parts of the world, regrettably, a few Sunnis take umbrage at that and attack Shias. In India, that does not happen. In India, we get along smoothly. But if the Shias today hated today's Sunnis for what may have happened 1400 years ago, that would be unfair. But if the Sunnis said the Shias should not even mourn I'm not, majority of the Sunnis don't say that, don't get me wrong, but that the Shias should not even mourn the brutal and wrong assassination of Hassan and Hussein, that would, you can feel it in your heart, that's not the right thing to do. This is essentially what this matter is. It's a matter of emotions. And I would strongly advise that we need to approach it as calmly as possible. And I, as a Shiv Bhakt, am trying to approach it as calmly as possible. But the truth must be spoken. That's what he said. Historical right.
This point of truth, for instance, can a court decide the truth? Can a survey decide the truth? Truth ultimately, especially in religious truth, is what is a personal belief. So that point really, and that our constitution and our founding fathers made the point of, in a sense, a separation of the state and faith. And are those lines not blurring at the moment? And for instance, the point you made that you can't punish communities of today for what, say, Mughal rulers may have done. You can celebrate perhaps the rule of Akbar, you can look down on Aurangzeb, but today's Muslim is not in any sense liable for it. But those lines are what are getting dangerously blurred when we talk.
I would completely agree with you that today's Muslims have nothing to do. And this is something that must be spoken of repeatedly. One of the things which I've said often in the past, that a mistake our establishment historians have made, and frankly our Bollywood movies as well, given the impression that Delhi Sultans and Mughals were Indians, that Alauddin Khilji looked like Ranveer Singh, and and Akbar looked like Prithviraj Kapoor, which is not true actually. To us, they would have looked Chinese. They were actually from Central Asia. They did not speak Urdu. Urdu is an Indian language. It's our language. They would have spoken Turkic or Persian. Aurangzeb did not call himself Mughal. He did not see Babur as the founder of his dynasty. You can see the royal seals of the what we call the Mughal emperors. At the top is actually Temur. They call themselves Temurid. They were descendants of Temur the Turk, and they were very clear that they were Turks. They were very, very, very clear. So I wanna say that the debate should be framed correctly. It is not a Hindu-Muslim issue. It is a foreigner-Indian issue. These were foreign invaders who committed unspeakable crimes in India. And they didn't just commit it in India, by the way. They committed these crimes across the world. There are two groups, largely, Turkic Muslims and European Christians, who massacred tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of people across the world.
Is that how the debate actually is today? Is that how the debate is actually? It becomes about majority versus minority politics, and it becomes as a sense of victimhood of the majority, which many would disagree with and say that, is that a valid one, and should the point I'm making that, are we weaponizing faith for political reasons, for political advantage from either side?
I wouldn't say we are weaponizing faith. Let's, if you're talking about, the approach of various communities, let's look at data. I always suggest, that to look at long-term issues, one should look at data. Look at across the entire Indian subcontinent. There are only two countries where the proportion of minorities, where the minorities as a proportion of the population has actually gone up in the last 70 years. Only two. One of them is India, by the way. We all know what has happened to the Hindu, Sikh, Christian minority in Pakistan, in Afghanistan. There were 7 lakh Hindu, Sikhs, Christians in Afghanistan in the 1970s. Today, they're around 200 to 300. So this has actually been one of the biggest genocides of the last 100 years. What has happened to minorities in some of our neighboring countries. Whereas in India, the proportion of minorities has gone up from Muslim minority from 8% to 14.5%.
But we celebrate that. That's why India stands out in the world, surely. That's what we should preserve
so the point
and cherish.
I'm trying to make is that shows that India is actually a decent liberal country. And one of the key things in decency and liberalism and Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb is mutual respect, right? That a thing that is important, like for example, I would never belittle the Prophet or say something. I would never do. You will never find any statement of me doing that. And Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb means that there should be respect to what is critical to a community which has actually been very decent for the last 70 years as compared to many other countries in our region. Let's be honest, Data is very clear.
But let's not compare ourselves ever with Pakistan or Afghanistan. Thankfully, India has really been, I think, an example to the world in that sense.
I agree, Sonia. I'm not saying we are perfect.
But on that point you're making,
but if a community
of that Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, the point you just made, after the Ayodhya verdict, we really did see that in some senses, where in a sense, because of the Supreme Court, whether it's been our democracy, our governments, our Supreme Court, that has stood firm in terms of the verdict that was delivered. It was accepted by everybody. There was no fear. There was a fear of a fallout that didn't happen. And in that Ayodhya verdict, it made it very clear that this is an exceptional case, that all the points you are making was actually made by the Supreme Court as well, and this will not happen again. But are we then, today it's the Gyanvapi issue, tomorrow it will be another issue, do we then open a Pandora's box?
Where the resolution will take place, I don't know. But the point is, for that, should truth be not spoken of? There were, for example, among the crimes, the fault lines that happened was also caste oppression. Right? We speak very truthfully of what happened. India also made compensation for it. We have run the biggest positive discrimination affirmative action program in the history of humanity for the last 70 years as a nation to address the issue of caste oppression, and we speak the truth of it. Hasn't India actually improved in the last 70 years in terms of how the caste issue is addressed? Again, I'm not saying we are perfect, but haven't we improved? And so I would repeat once again what Mahatma Gandhi said, what Gautam Buddha said, what Adi Shankaracharya said, what Jesus Christ said. Truth is the best disinfectant.
Truth is absolutely the best disinfectant, but the point being, so what happens? Suppose, for instance, and I think again, nobody really denies the fact that there was a mandir which was demolished for the masjid. What happens next then?
That will be for the wisdom of India to figure out. And do I have faith in India's wisdom? Certainly. We are the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive. Many of the cultures that started civilization with us have all been wiped out. Most of them by the same people, by the way, Turkic and Europeans, most of them. And India, after 1,000 years of invasions, the American historian Will Durant called the Turkic invasion the bloodiest invasion in human history. European colonialism, we all know what happened. We've read Shashi Tharoor's book, Madhuri Mukherjee's books. But despite that, after 1,000 years, at 1947 and at 1950, when we adopted our constitution, India still had the wisdom to say that we will still be a liberal, secular nation. Having said that, our liberalism is not a weak liberalism. It is a strong liberalism. It is Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's liberalism. Chhatrapati Shivaji was the first among the modern kings to ban slavery, by the way. At a time when his competitors, both Aurangzeb and the Portuguese, made huge profits out of slavery, it made his war effort difficult, and yet he said slavery is adharma, so he will not do it. Having said that, he was still ruthless and tough with his enemies. So the point I'm trying to make is we are liberal but strong. We will find that balance.
So you have faith in India's wisdom, but do you have faith in politicians' wisdom? The problem is that this plays into a divisive narrative. If you take it as a standalone issue, everything you say makes sense, but does it play into a larger divisive narrative?
Sonia, politicians will do what politicians do, and I have no beef with them. They have to win elections. But the responsibility then falls on wiser people such as you, hopefully me, to talk calmly of this issue and try and aid, unity. Like I would like to say once again, Aurangzeb was a foreigner. He never saw himself as an Indian, but his brother was also a foreigner, Dara Shikoh. We can look at him as a role model. Aurangzeb destroyed the Gyanvapi Mosque. Dara Shikoh stayed at the Gyanvapi Mosque and learned Sanskrit there. So who's the role model we look at? And I would urge even my fellow Hindus to see this, that the Ram Janmabhoomi temple is being rebuilt. One of the key people who helped make this happen was a historian and archaeologist called K.K. Mohammed, a Muslim from Kerala, who was devoted to the truth, and he spoke the truth, and his research helped that decision. So we should see what are the role models we look at, and can we aid the cause of unity while still speaking the truth. Remember, if we do not heal wounds, they turn septic, and then that poison comes out somewhere else.
So let me ask you, Amish, because of course, on a day that you announced a new book also, you're in London, you're director of the Nehru Centre. What do you say when you see headlines in newspapers, or when people in London or in the West, when they interact with you, ask what's happening in India currently? Is there a communal divisiveness on the rise in India? What's your answer?
Western media I've seen out here, they get it wrong very often, from WMDs in Iraq to various things. And I'm not trying to sound this thing, but they have the blood of millions of Middle Easterners on their hands, Western media. But what we need to do is speak, facts. Now, let me get facts on the ground. Like I said, the minority proportion has actually gone up in India as compared to most other countries. If you read the national sample surveys, the average Muslim in Kerala is wealthier than the average Hindu, say, in Bihar. So actually, India is relatively liberal, and people vote with their feet. If India was such a divisive, anti-Muslim place, why are Rohingya Muslims from Burma coming to India rather than walking just a little forward and going to Pakistan, which is an Islamic country? It's because actually India is a liberal, decent place. There are extremists. There are 1.4 billion of us. We are a quarter of humanity. There are more people in India than all of North America, Europe, and Middle East combined. So will you find some idiots? Yes. But a vast majority of us are deeply liberal and inclusive. But the only point I'd like to suggest is that true strength will come when we speak the truth, when we don't hide things of the past. And I would suggest that we frame the debate correctly, that what has happened to us in these invasions, we don't confuse the British Raj with Indian Christians. The main mistake we make is we confuse the Turkic colonial Raj, who were foreigners. Very clearly, they were foreigners. We confuse that with Indian Muslims. Indian Muslims were as oppressed under the Turkic colonial rule. 95% of Indian Muslims are Paswandas. They were as oppressed under the Turkic colonial rule. We need to frame the debate correctly.
I think, Amish, what you and I both agree on is that facts really at the heart of any debate and must be the core. But the nuance you talk about, I wonder if when it's out on the streets, when that people actually get that, and what sometimes the larger message that goes out. But thank you so much for joining me tonight on a debate that is currently dominating the news headlines. Thank you, Amish.